anybody who's had a grandparent or a parent go through this looks at this and goes, I identify this immediately. I know what's happening here. And it's devastating. But at the same time, you made your bed. Now you must lie in it.
Have you ever seen vultures circling a wounded animal? I have. I see them all the time. In fact, here in Texas, we have these crazy vultures that are just like, they don't even wait for the animal to die. They just start picking at the carcass, even if the animal is like semi-alive still, like just barely. They don't even care. I mean, right here in Hill Country, my husband jokes around and calls them the buffet busters. I mean, that's what they do. They come in, they wait for the kill, which is usually a big truck hitting an armadillo, deer, squirrel, whatever, doesn't matter, whatever it is, a possum. By the way, I avoided a possum the other day on the road. It was late at night. And it was so crazy because I was like, what is that? And I was in a dark country road. And all of a sudden I turned on my high beams. There it was, this giant possum just hissing at me with its big teeth. And I would do an example of that, but I would be too embarrassed to do it. But it just hissed at me. What if I told you that there are vultures circling around the White House right now? But they're even more fierce than the ones here in Texas Hill Country, right? They're so fierce. Some of them have the face of Gretchen Whitmer. Some of them have the face of maybe even Chuck Schumer, maybe a George Clooney, maybe a Nancy Pelosi, maybe just keep naming. Those vultures are circling around. They're circling around the White House, waiting for something to happen with Biden. Either his political career completely ends or they actually want him to really die. And it's pretty scary when you think about it. Here's the leader of the free world, supposedly. I've always said this, for those of you who listen to my podcast. What have I said from the very beginning? Who is the unelected official running the White House? Because Biden obviously has not been running the White House. He's been just a puppet. He's been a puppet. So who's going to replace the puppet? Whitmer's licking her chops. Kamala licking her chops. Oh, Gavin Newsom's grossing me out. He's licking his chops and fixing his hair. How about Pete Buttigieg? Right? Who will replace him if he goes? And what's going to happen to all the states that already have him on the ballot? I mean, is it going to be a write-in? Are people going to have to know what to do here? Because elections are apparently so confusing in America. It's going to be difficult enough as it is. And we have 4 months. Things are happening very, very quickly. And I have Tudor Dixon on the show today to break it all down for you. It's an amazing show, and I can't wait to share it with you. But folks, MyPillow first. I love MyPillow. You know that. I've got Macy May Buttercup. She's laying underneath my desk on her little, small MyPillow dog bed, and she's actually snoring. I'm grateful that you all can't hear that because it's really quite loud for me, and I try to ignore it. But she loves this bed. My big labs love the bed. My husband's guide dog loves his big MyPillow dog bed. All of them love these MyPillow beds. I love my pillow towels, my pillow sheets. I can go on and on and on. And I love the fact that Mike Lindell truly loves America and cares about our nation and has an American company with American workers. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to go to mypillow.com/Carter, that's CARTER, and enter promo code Carter. I want you to enter the promo code Carter, CARTER, to get the MyPillow dog bed for as low as $25. Think about that. What a great deal, right? For Sarah Carter listeners, and free shipping on orders over $75. The inner bed is removable and the zippered cover is washable and dryable. Both cover and insert can be washed cold or warm on a regular cycle. Paw prints are plaid. It's so cute. And there's a variety of colors: brown, blue, green, pink, and so much more. Limited 10-year warranty. Think about that on a dog bed. Give your dog great comfort. Visit mypillow.com/Carter and enter code Carter, CARTER, to be sure to use the promo code Carter to get the $25 sale price and free shipping on your order over $75. Again, mypillow.com/Carter and enter the promo code Carter to get the $25 sale price on dog beds. For all of you out there, I know you love her. It's Tudor Dixon. She's the host of the Tudor Dixon podcast. I think it's a phenomenal podcast, and the former Republican gubernatorial candidate for the state of Michigan. And gosh, Tudor, you would have made the most amazing governor for Michigan. It would have been just absolutely incredible. Incredible.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think the state of Michigan was duped by abortion, and that's how we ended up in the situation that we're in. But if you look at the actual state and what's happening, it's pretty sad.
Yeah, it is. It is actually very tragic because it's such a beautiful state and has so much to offer, and it's being mismanaged to the hilt by Whitmer. Let's talk a little bit about that. I want to just go and hit the abortion issue really quick, because that is, I mean, probably one of the most divisive issues, right? That even on the national scale that we're dealing with. I just received a call from somebody, I'm not going to give a name up, but, you know, the RNC platform has changed, and, you know, they pulled out basically what had been there for 48 years, that, you know, abortion, that was a pro-life stance. And right now it's going to reflect what President Trump, actually his campaign has been very public about, which is that it should be left up to the states, that the abortion issue should be left up to the states. And I think that's a strategic move on the part of politicos that are telling President Trump, hey, we don't want to be divisive on this issue of abortion. We don't want to end up losing the election because of it. And let's just have this, you know, this new kind of platform.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I'm not sure how to feel about that. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Look at what happened. And I want people to understand this. This could easily make or break a candidacy, right?
I mean, I thoroughly believe that that's what happened in the state of Michigan. And I think it's devastating to think that we can't say that we are for life, that we believe in the sanctity of life. And that's where this country has gone. But it was very interesting. Before Roe, before Dobbs, you had the pro-life groups that were endorsing candidates, putting lots of money in. And even in the primary in Michigan, we had a lot of flyers going out from pro-life groups. And I believe that was a big push to get us across the finish line in the primary. And no one knew what would happen with Dobbs, because I don't think anybody could have anticipated the weaponization of life and the way they have twisted it. And at first they started off with, well, you know, rape or incest or these horrific situations, which are awful. And there's no way to talk about that and say, yeah, well, I approve this, I don't approve that. It's a horrible situation.
Right.
It's devastating. I've not been in that situation. It's hard to talk about. However, I just saw Ashley Judd on TV I think it was last week, and she was saying, how can women space their children if they're going to take away abortion? I was like, okay, that's what we were saying. See, it's not about safe, legal, and rare. This is about birth control. And if you are using this as a married person to space your children out, then you have to just be honest. That's what this is now. It's birth control. And I think Bill Maher said it best when he said, I mean, if we're being honest, I'm for a little bit of murdering babies. I'm okay with that. And when you're using it in that way, that means you are okay with that. Politically, who could have known the firebomb that was coming? I was even shocked by the number of Christian women who took me aside and said, hey, look, we're Christians. We've got girls in college. Back off of life. Walk away from it. And you need to know who I am. If I'm running for office, you need to know who I am. But the thing that I kept saying was, the governor doesn't have a choice in this. It's not the ballot. The people of the state of Michigan will choose. And when the one time the media pushed back on Gretchen Whitmer and they said, well, she's saying that it's not up to the governor. This is a constitutional amendment. And if the people choose it, then she can't touch it. Gretchen Whitmer said, well, that's not true. She can. Well, that's not true.
Yeah, she was not telling the truth at all at that point and using those kind of fear tactics to kind of push her own agenda. And I think as I'm listening to both sides of this argument, and I mean, this is and I'm talking from the internal Republican, back and forth behind the scenes issues that they're dealing with between evangelicals and between the Trump campaign and between others. It's this very divisive issue that President Trump is saying, whoa, wait a minute. The Supreme Court decided we're going to leave it up to the states to make that decision. And then others on the evangelical side are saying, well, hey, we have to stand on a platform that actually believes and supports a pro-life agenda because of the 14th Amendment. And we have to believe that every life is precious. And so I'm hearing both sides of this, and I'm feeling for you, because I remember that was a big issue that you had to deal with. And now I think we're going to see that coming up in November. I mean, even if it's behind the scenes.
Well, and I argue, I mean, I had a candidate just a couple of days ago say to me, now right to life is not even coming into races in the state of Michigan. And I said, okay, but let's be fair here. They saw they're being honest about what happened, and it does not make them care less about life, because if you look at the state of Michigan, abortions have skyrocketed. And so what did it do to come into a political race? And I'm very clear about the political part of it, because sometimes just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that I believe everybody in the state of Michigan should be a Christian. And if I were elected to office, I would force that. No, I understand the politics of things. I'm not running to be God. I'm not running to be your pastor. I'm running to be your governor. And I have to understand that. But the voter also has to understand that there are limitations of a politician. If you have lost the hearts and minds of people, one politician is not going to come in as Jesus and change their minds. That's just not, and you would be disturbed if that could happen, right? That's not how it happens. And so I think this idea, too often we have said, if you don't stand up as a pastor would and do this, then you're not qualified for this office. But you may be qualified for the office by understanding that we have to get that number down in a different way. And that means that maybe those life groups that spent all of that money for 50 years on politicians didn't know that it wasn't impacting hearts and minds. On the other side, they were spending millions of dollars the other way in school with Planned Parenthood, teaching kids about abortion, all of this push for free sex and love can be anywhere and all of this stuff.
Right.
We were fighting on the political grounds. Now it's time to fight on the hearts and minds grounds. And so where I think that I actually believe that the platform should say, hey, look, we believe in the sanctity of life. That is how we feel. And we will do everything we can to protect life. And that comes in many different ways. And oftentimes that is to make sure that pregnancy centers are abundant, that they are funded, that you have access to care. That's a funny thing. You listen to these Democrats and they're like, oh, they're taking away healthcare. I'm like, wait a minute. Gretchen Whitmer actually took away healthcare because she took away all the money from the pregnancy centers. She took away all the money from adoption. She for crisis centers in areas where women had no care, she took the money away from them. And I'm like, if you actually are trying to tell me you're pro-choice, then you would allow people to have that choice to keep their child. But they've forced it so that you're forced into abortion. And that's where I think Republicans really need to fight back and say, hey, we understand. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's been legal. What we want to do is bring back that value to say, life is important. We're going to provide everything to the American people possible to help them make sure they can keep their family.
I think that is just a brilliant way of putting it. And I love the way that you approach this and saying, like, we need to get more grassroots. I mean, we saw the left doing that with Planned Parenthood, with pushing their agenda, whatever that, which was this, very non-religious agenda, of like free sex, open sex. You should be able to do whatever you want and have your choice over your body, regardless of the fact that you could possibly become pregnant and then have the choice to abort the baby. But instead have like a grassroots movement where people are like saying, look, wait a minute, besides everything else, life is precious. And we have to find a way to support life and support young mothers and give them alternatives, to what can, outside of abortion, what can you do if you have this beautiful child? There's so many parents that want to adopt. There's so many other ways of handling this and helping support a young life and a young mother. That I absolutely agree with. Let's go to Whitmer because, oh my gosh, wow. This is like, was as soon as George Clooney and a bunch of people have like been saying, Biden's got to get out. He's got to get out. We can all see what is going on with him. And sadly, he's deteriorating rapidly, which is terrifying to know that the president of the United States is in this position. Here is a line from the Associated Press. In an interview with the Associated Press, Whitmer did what she could to shut down such speculation that she would be selected, actually to run for the presidency. I mean, this is someone that can't even manage the state of Michigan. When asked if she would consider becoming a candidate this year if Biden were to step down, she responded with a definitive no. It's a distraction more than anything. I don't like seeing my name in articles like that because I'm totally focused on governing and campaigning for the ticket. Well, everything has changed now. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, well, she said it was a distraction when she was being picked for VP potentially, but our sources tell us that Biden actually called her in 2020 and said, you have been chosen. Her staff was looking at property. And then they came back, the Biden staff came back and said, no, we can't go with you because we have to check a few more boxes here and you don't check those boxes. So she was at that time saying it was a distraction. But let's look at what she decided to do. She decided to launch a book right after this debate, knowing the debate was early. And the book was very quickly written because there are things that in the book that just happened a couple of months ago. And so we know that in December, she was interviewed and someone said, oh, there's rumors that there's a book. No. And she always does that laugh, kind of like the Kamala laugh.
Yeah.
And there's no book. And then about a week later, she's like, turns out, yeah, there's going to be a book coming out. And they very quickly wrote this book. It was released on Monday.
They've got to have these weird ghostwriters just sitting in the background, just waiting, like chapter after chapter. It's like, what's going to happen now? And they must have known that Biden was going to totally mess up on this debate because I knew it. I was telling people on the Republican side, I'm like, why are you guys panicked about CNN? Because I'm telling you right now, CNN will not be able to cover this up.
Oh, that to me is the true scandal of this. She's the co-chair of the campaign. She 100% knew what was happening. Her ghostwriter is the same ghostwriter Gavin Newsom used. Yes, they called someone up and they said, we have an opportunity. And this is her kind of her MO. When she ran for governor, she's always running for the next thing. So no matter where she's been in state government, she's always been pushing for leadership and then governor. And so when she was running for governor in 2018, they put marijuana on the ballot. So she didn't run. She's essentially never run for office. She never had to run. It was, if you go with Republicans, it won't be marijuana. Again, something that people were going to choose, but they're very, very crafty with how they manipulate people's minds. Even though they're choosing, they believe they also have to choose the Democrat. So she won in 2018 with a ballot initiative. And I think ballot initiatives can be very dangerous from this standpoint, or at least we haven't been paying close enough attention to them. And so you go to 2022, what's on the ballot? A ballot initiative. And there was no holding her accountable for what she's done. But if you look at her record in the state, it is absolutely horrendous. And it's funny because she just called this council together because, whenever anything is horrible, you're like, announce a new committee and that'll solve the whole thing, right? So she created this committee that was going to tell her how to grow Michigan. And she put a Republican on that was an ambassador for Trump. And she put all these Democrats on. And this was a bipartisan committee. And this committee came back and said, there is likely no growth through 2030. And in the next 10 years or so, they expect us to lose a population of almost 1 million people. Now, remember, during her term, we've actually, in the last sentence, we lost a congressional seat because the population decline has been so great. So now we're going to lose another nearly 1 million people because of, I think by 2050, because of what she did in her administration, we will not see growth. We'll actually see decline through 2050, and they could only see through 2050. Now, she's also used this SOAR fund, which we could have called the taxpayer slush fund, to try to bring in corporations. Places, states like Tennessee, Texas, they've all been very successful by using taxpayer money and incentives. She so far has brought a Chinese company to kind of western central Michigan, and the people who live there have tried vehemently to get rid of this company because there was a non-disclosure agreement around it. And one of the only factories in the entire state that has never required any environmental protection review whatsoever. And they'll be right in our watershed, and they'll be using more water than the Nestle plant in Michigan.
Oh, of course. Wait, this is like such huge news, because this is what frustrates me. I'm so grateful that you brought this up. How does this happen? How does it happen that an adversary, because even if it's a Chinese company, it's connected to the Chinese government. We know that the CCP has its fingers in every single corporation that it has in its nation. Doesn't matter. It's not independent of their government. And they just come into our country, the CCP, and establishes this, factory in the middle of Michigan, and nobody's allowed to check on it. Why are they saying that they're a developing nation? So they're using that as their excuse, like for no one coming in and inspecting them. How does this happen? Tudor, how?
So that I will tell you, it was actually with the help of Republicans in the legislature, and it was a huge win for her right before the election, right before the 2022 election, because they said this is going to be 2,700 jobs, and this is great. And then at the time, I went on the radio and I said, this is devastating, because this is a Chinese corporation that is bringing Chinese nationals into the state using our resources, and it's very dangerous. It's likely connected to the CCP, because every Chinese corporation is, They just hammered me. You would get rid of these jobs. Well, then we started doing research after the election, found out that on their website, they say that every one of their factories has to have a CCP organized headquarters there. I mean, that's on their website.
That's like when we found out the CCP had their own like police stations in the United States.
Yes.
Remember that? It's like, wait a minute. When can we do that in Beijing?
English.
Yeah.
Right. This is in English. I think that their parent company, the CEO of the parent company, is something like a secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it all connects. But then what the really suspicious thing is that this is $715 million of taxpayer money that they would receive. And the legislators, the governor, even our sitting Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin, who's now running for the U.S. Senate, signed an NDA that they won't talk about this. And it's funny because this is the behind the scenes of politics that people just don't know. And I didn't know. I go into this meeting with the Michigan manufacturers, and I have one of the auto companies look at me, and she said, well, I understand you're upset about these NDAs. Would you continue to give corporate welfare? And I said, she said, can you tell me if you agree with the corporate welfare we just received? And I said, well, I can't tell you because I can't see I can't see what the deal is. And are you upset with these NDAs, these non-disclosure agreements? And I said, you're using taxpayer money. We should know why. The taxpayer this should not be hidden. You should not have people who are elected to represent you who are signing a document saying they won't tell you what they're doing in government. That's very sick. So, and then you do this with a Chinese corporation. And then we find out that Whitmer has waived any environmental testing, which that was interesting.
That's so Democrat of her,
Democrats
right?
Got mad.
That's so Democrat of her. It's like, wait a minute. You guys are the ones that believe in global warming. You're telling us all the time that we need to be, we need all these regulations. But yet, if it's the CCP, we're okay with that. We're not going to.
And a battery factory. So think about that. I mean, you're bringing in some massive chemicals into this farm town, and you're right off the watershed. You're right. I mean, you're miles, just like 75, 100 miles from Lake Michigan, and 75, 100 miles from our one of our military bases here in the state. All of this very suspect. We're all very concerned about this. And then suddenly it starts to be like, well, it's going to be like 2,200 jobs. And then, it might be 1,300 jobs. And then people start to say, well, there's a similar factory in Grand Rapids, and we were told it was going to be all these jobs, and it's all robotics. So ultimately, these wins where China walks away with $715 million worth of incentives from our taxpayer dollars, we don't get anything. We don't get any jobs. Under Gretchen Whitmer, we have lost half of our Fortune 500 companies. I mean, this is catastrophic that nobody knows. No one understands her true record.
I am so glad that you brought this up, because this really is the Dems agenda. It is an underhanded play against our nation. I don't really understand it. We saw it in our face under the Biden administration. We know that an unelected official in the Biden administration is running all the shots, or somebody on the outside, maybe like former President Obama, or, I can speculate. I can speculate on who that might be. So really the United States is in jeopardy. We have people like Gretchen Whitmer who look like they could possibly be the candidate. I mean, if Biden gets pushed out, which I'm saying looks more and more likely every day, because there's just too many people putting pressure. Jill Biden, as much as she wants this, she won't be able to handle this kind of pressure, right, Tudor? I mean, you've got...
But Sarah, how do they do it? Because, I mean, can you imagine if right now we said, actually, Donald Trump is polling really badly, and we've actually decided we think he's too old, so we're going to replace him. They would go bananas. They would say, you cannot replace your nominee now. We've been running against your nominee this whole time. And this is, the primary's done. Legally, he's on the ballot in all these states that can't change it now. How could you possibly do this? And the fact that we're even giving this air makes me frustrated, because I think they would never consider that we could replace our nominee at this point. The idea that they are now like, you know what, looks really bad for us, so it's time for him to go, no. You knew who he was.
Right.
You knew who you nominated, and don't tell me. And I feel bad, because I do think there are some Democrats who are voters who've watched MSNBC, who've watched CNN, and I've talked to people who have said, I had no idea, because they hid it. And this is journalistic malpractice. They called it cheap fakes the week before, and then they're like, oh crap, now he's on TV and it's obvious the man is in complete cognitive decline. Anybody who's had a grandparent or a parent go through this looks at this and goes, I identify this immediately. I know what's happening here. And it's devastating. But at the same time, you made your bed. Now you must lie in it.
That's such another fantastic point, Tudor, because you know what? It's not like KJP is supposed to lie. Corinne Jean-Pierre, she wants to lie for him. That's what she's paid for. She's like, I'm just going to keep lying to everybody. And she's like a prolific one. She lies even when the truth is like right in her face. But it's up to the media. Right? The media was supposed to be challenging this. Anytime I said something, anytime somebody else said something, and I'm obviously more of a pundit columnist now. I'm not so much as an investigative journalist as I used to be, but I could see it, and we could literally see the decline. We were called out as like, being anti-American. You're lying. These are.
I know, that was crazy. Conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, I'm a conspiracy theorist. And now they're saying, okay, now you got to go. But you're right. They're already made their bed. Many of these
look
states
at the political
can't
gymnastics.
Yeah. What are they going to do?
You watch, because like Jerry Nadler comes out and he's like, he's got to step out.
Right.
And then you see the machine. This is how the political machine works behind the scenes, especially for the Democrats. You see the machine, he comes back, he's like, I didn't really mean that. Actually, we're with Joe. And it's the machine is crumbling. I mean, Nancy Pelosi was cornered in the hallway today, and she's like, I'm not answering your questions. And when have we ever seen Nancy Pelosi like that outside of her ripping up the State of the Union address because she couldn't stand Donald Trump? When it comes to her own people, she's cool, calm, and collected, but she's losing it. I mean, she's also, I think, as older older than Biden. I think she's older than Biden. You look at all these people, they're part of that generation. Those people are holding on tightly. I mean, they don't want to believe that he can't do it. But I also think that they have been around long enough that they know if you replace him now, I mean, even if somebody else comes in, and I believe that's why Gretchen Whitmer thinks this is her time, because like I said, she came in 18 on riding on marijuana, in 22 riding on abortion, and she knows if her record is scrutinized, then she can't win another election. So if she comes in now where you can't really litigate a case against her.
There won't be enough time to litigate against her. Unless we all start
that's
now.
Why you have all the vultures. That's why you have all the vultures, the Newsoms and the Whitmers, and they're all just kind of hanging around saying, okay, when is he out? When is he out? When is he out? There has never been a group of people that are more disgusting than this group, who are literally waiting for the man to become so cognitively disabled that he can't go on. Or really, let's be honest, they want him to die.
They do. They actually do. I do believe that. They want him to die. And I like the way you describe them as vultures, because that's the way that I see him. I have vultures all around my house because we are in Texas, and I don't know what's going on here, but we got so much deer and, armadillos and everything, and they get hit. And all of a sudden my husband calls it the buffet busters, because they show up and they're busting the buffet. And I think that's what's happening with, Joe Biden. They are the buffet busters. I can just see Nancy Pelosi's head on a vulture. I think you just actually created somebody's cartoon, a political cartoon that's going to show up like sometime in this month. I know it when someone hears this, but we really, that fear is like, what happens to our nation as our adversaries are watching this? And Michigan's going to play a significant role in the upcoming election. I mean, we've got Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. They're all listed as toss-ups, according to Cook Political Report. How are things looking on the ground in your state right now?
Well, I have to say that the Democrats are incredibly powerful in Michigan. In 2016, I think they went, oh my goodness, how did this happen? We all know no one was anticipating this organic support for Trump to come out, and they don't have that kind of organic support. And there's nobody that will bring that kind of organic support to them, because they just don't have a figure like that. And they don't have policies that you want to follow. Nobody on the Democrat side is coming out and saying, we're going to protect you. They're coming out and saying, this is what's wrong with you, and that's why you need an advocate. It's a very different message. Whereas the Republican side is like, we are going to be strong, we are going to be safe, and we are going to be wealthy again. And that's a message that people can get behind. And when you have a figure like Trump, it just kind of brings people to the table. They don't have that. So they went to Colorado and they were like, okay, how did you kind of take over? And it's a very sneaky system of C4s and all this dark money that comes in and goes door to door.
We saw that in looking back in 2016. It was crazy to see what was going on. In 2020 was even more so. So it was just.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and we don't know what they're doing. I mean, look, Jocelyn Benson, who's our Secretary of State, when I was asked the question they ask every Republican, like, are you going to accept the results of an election? And I mean, what a bogus question. Like, everyone from the beginning of time has been allowed to contest an election. If you feel like it's close, if you feel like something happened, you are legally allowed to contest an election. So what am I, a prophet? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not going to answer that question. But if I look at what Jocelyn Benson did in the state of Michigan, I mean, she just lost this court case with the RNC because she removed the signature match. How do you know if any of these ballots are right? Anybody could get a ballot then. I mean, the guy and one of the guys in our office got 7 absentee ballot applications to his house. They were for people who had lived there years before. He could have easily sent in every single one, and no one would have checked the signature. So how often was that happening? And that is a true question. And the fact that the media says to me, how could you question that? How can you not question that? Of course, you're going to question whether or not, when you find out they did something so illegitimate that you take away the one safety lever you have in the election process, and then you go out and you tell everybody it's the safest election we've ever had. Well, give me a break. And those are the kinds of shenanigans they played. But I think the funny thing about my election, they are so good with ads. And they're so good at getting ads out through digitally, through your cell phone, through social media, through connected TVs. And Republicans, I have to say, we're just not as good. But they created this ad about me, and it was a cartoon. I didn't see it until afterward. And then they were like touting that this got an award and they won the election with this. And it was a cartoon where there were three moms pushing babies in baby strollers. And one of them was Betsy DeVos. And I was the baby, but I was a full life, like my normal size in a stroller. And then the one mom asks Betsy, like, how old is your baby? And she says something like, oh, she's 2,500 months and she'll do whatever I want. She'll take all the money away from public schools and she'll ban abortion. And they sent this to all the young women in the state. And it was effective. They're effective. They have techniques that we are not using. And I've warned people, you have to get out there and make sure you combat the lies.
I agree. And I think the Republican Party is, made so many mistakes in the past. I think people within the RNC are getting better. I think Lara Trump is going to do a phenomenal job there. But I think we've got to move fast. I mean, they have a machine. It's insane when you see Biden up there and you see the people working in the Biden administration and you're like, oh my gosh, I could put high school students in those positions and they would do a better job. How did they win? How How are women in America buying these lies? And it's generational.
I feel like I know.
Tell me.
I think it's because, I wasn't political before. I would say my like stepping into politics would have been 2017. And before that, I was very engaged. I always voted. I was always engaged in choosing, but I wasn't like hyper sensitive, like, out there in the news and talking about this stuff all the time. So I can remember my pre-political self. And I was very manipulated by what commercials I saw and the messages that were coming through. And I say this because I remember them they wanted to make it illegal to hunt wolves in the state. And I never see a wolf. I'm in the Lower Peninsula, but the commercials were all these little cubs and they were so cute and these little puppies and they're going to kill these puppies. And my girlfriend, her husband worked for the DNR in the Upper Peninsula. And I was like, gosh, how are we going to vote on this? And she was like, you have no idea. Nobody can let their dog out at night. You can't, they're cattle are being attacked by wolves. Like, this is a huge problem. This idea that they're almost extinct is a lie. And I was like, that was the first time I'm like, oh gosh, this is very manipulative. And now that I'm in it, I see how easy it is if you are not researching to be lied to, but also if the other side isn't telling the truth. And that's where I complain. We are not putting those ads out. We're like, who would believe that these wolves are going to go out and be like murdered and they're just puppies? And it's like, hi, hello, I'm the one.
I would have been that one too. It's like when I watch the commercials, of the Humane Society, and I'm just like, I'm drowning in tears. My husband's like, why are you crying? I'm like, you didn't just see that commercial with that beautiful music and the puppies and they're, and I'm completely manipulated by the, by animal commercials, especially, but by Democrats too. I mean, we can easily be swayed in one direction. And that is pretty frightening.
We have a woman running against John James right now. And one of the gals in our office just sent this yesterday, I think. And she did an ad where she comes out. And I have to tell you, if you are not totally paying attention to what is happening in John James' campaign, she's like, I have to tell you my own personal story. I lost my dad when I was a sophomore in college to a horrible cancer, suddenly lost him. And then a few weeks later, I found out the unthinkable. I was pregnant. I had no idea. It came out of nowhere. I'm like, did it though? And then she's like, and then I had to have my friend take me across state lines in her minivan. Thank goodness her mom sent her minivan to us so we could go to Fort Wayne to get this abortion. And in John James, Michigan, that won't be available. And I'm like, if you're a young woman and you hear the story like, oh my gosh, her dad died and then somehow she ended up pregnant. She didn't even know that was going to happen. Who knows how that happened? And then all of a sudden she had to run off and get this abortion and she would be running across state lines again if John James gets elected. People get manipulated by that stuff.
Yeah, and they say they fall victim to that idea that, someone's going to take away something that would be like a unique right of theirs. They believe
Yeah.
that that's a right, and you make a point earlier in this interview where you talk about, and I've heard this before, where it's used like, birth control. Abortion should not be synonymous, no matter what you believe, with birth control. It's dangerous for the woman receiving the abortion. It's obviously,
but why aren't we talking about that?
Yeah, we don't even bring it up as Republicans. We don't even bring up that issue as important as the little wolves crying in the wilderness that are going to be, what about the little babies, that are waiting to find life and to be born. Let me ask you this. I know I'm going to wrap it up with you. I've kept you for so long. I just love talking to you. But Michigan is unique because it has a large Arab population. I grew up in Saudi Arabia. My dad worked for Lockheed Martin. I am not Muslim. I'm not Arabic, but I grew up in the Middle East. How does that affect this race? And especially with everything that's been going on. I was in Israel twice over the last year, and it's certainly another huge divisive issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do have a big Arab population. And years ago, when we had the issue, when we kept seeing all of the women in Iran who were taking off their hijabs then they were being arrested. And I came out and I spoke against that, specifically against the hijab being forced upon people. And the Arab community was very upset about this. And at that time, I was talking about what was happening in Iran. But we went there and we sat down with a group of elders in the Arab community and we talked through it, and they told us about their culture. But honestly, they are very active politically, and they're torn right now because they are obviously on the Palestinian, most of them, I would say, are on the Palestinian side of this argument. They're mad at Biden. But it's interesting because they're also a very conservative group. They don't like the idea of all of this agenda, the trans agenda being pushed on kids. Right. They don't like that in their schools. They don't like some of these books that have porn in them. They were very active in 22 against that. So if you look at them, if you look at their culture, they actually align much more with Republicans. But they would tell me when I was campaigning that after 9/11, they wanted nothing to do with Republicans because Republicans were very Islamophobic and came out and said nasty things about anybody from the Middle East. And I can understand that. I mean, I really could sit down with them and okay, this is a side of things that I guess being in the situation where I don't deal with this, I didn't think about it, and obviously wasn't active in politics back then, but I can look back and say, yeah, I could see how that would turn you off and you would turn into a Democrat. But now they've lost them on the Palestine issue and they've lost them on the conservative issue. So I do think that for Democrats, it's going to be very hard to win that vote back right now. I don't know what they'll do. I don't know if they will choose not to vote. I don't know if they will. I feel like at the moment they feel very politically homeless because they don't feel understood by Republicans and they don't feel understood by Democrats. And it's a tough place to be. Yeah.
So not even Biden's push to be more harsh towards Israel in the recent months. I mean, that's what a lot of the experts, I've been seeing it too, are saying like it's kind of a ploy to win back Muslim voters in Michigan and throughout the country. That may not even work. I mean, that may not even work. And especially now with everything that's happened publicly with Biden, I mean, the Democrats are going to they're going to struggle a lot to bring them on board.
Right. I think Whitmer's been very good to them with incentives. And I've seen a lot of her taxpayer programs and projects going to the Arab community. So I think from that standpoint, they feel like, well, we've been treated well. However, she won't come out. She is a politician through and through. And that's the most important thing to her. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that are like, okay, I need to understand this. I need to get in there and talk and fully embrace whatever is going on in that community. So I know. And maybe that was to my detriment to try and talk to these communities across the state of Michigan who probably didn't like me.
But that's what you got to do, Tudor. You got to get out there. You did the right thing. You didn't lie to them. And the thing is, I feel like, in the United States, we are a melting pot of so many different cultures, but that also brings with it its own issues, especially when you have significant thousands of years of I guess, political and religious divisive issues that happen in nations thousands of miles from here, and then they come and it gets implanted here as well. It does become like, is this about America? Is this about something different? What does it mean? Can we culturally blend if we're carrying all of this angst from our own nations into the new nation? And these are all questions that have to be answered. I think you can't do that unless you are communicating with the groups. I think you did the right thing. And I just think that eventually, like you said, people wake up and they realize, wait a minute, maybe I've been played here. When it comes to other people that don't want to actually communicate or stand up for their values, unlike what you did, you stood up, you made points, you stood up for your values. And you don't see that with Whitmer. We don't see that with her.
Well, and I think that's something that politicians need to think about. And we need to talk to voters about this. Like, I'm not going to agree 100% of the time with everything that the folks in that community want. And I'm not going to agree 100% of the time with everything everybody in my community wants. I know I'm not going to agree with everything everybody in my little town wants. It's like, we aren't going to agree on everything. There's no perfect person out there for you. I mean, maybe if you get married, but if you're looking for a politician to be perfect for you, that's just not. And if you find someone who's telling you that, they're lying.
That's such a great point. Last question. Where do you think Michigan's going to fall in this race? I mean, just your own gut feeling. I'm not asking you to predict the future, but just your own gut feeling.
You will see Whitmer out there saying Michigan's a hard one. And I agree with her on that. I mean, we don't agree on much, but I agree with her on that because it's mostly red. The Democrats are very effective at getting out the vote, and we are not as effective. We are not as strong in this state on the organized ground game, but we're getting there. We have learned a lot. And so I think they're going to have a big run for their money. And I think that they are in the worst possible situation with what Whitmer's done, releasing this book. And she looks like she's trying to usurp the king. She looks bad in the eyes of Democrats right now. And we are suffering. There's no state that suffers as bad as Michigan. And I've talked to so many people who say, well, when I look back at the Trump years, I did well. So I think that we are likely going for Trump, but we've got 4 months. And Sarah, anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Where can my listeners download and subscribe to your podcast, Tudor?
Yeah, the TudorDixonPodcast.com and check out that, or go to our Twitter. It's at Tudor Dixon, Facebook at Tudor Dixon. Check it out. And we always put links on there, and so you can connect. It's on iHeart.
Thank you so much. It's a great podcast, and I hope you come back on the show sometime soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was fun.
Do you know that experts call gold the everything hedge? Gold goes far beyond hedging against inflation or the stock market and gives you peace of mind that your money is invested in something with real tangible value. That's why gold just hit another record high, and central banks keep buying gold at a record pace. That's also why I've partnered with the top-rated company, Goldco. Listen to their current offer. Get 10% instant match in free bonus silver with a qualified account. Plus, visit SarahLikesGold.com to qualify for a free 1-ounce silver Ronald Reagan coin. Diversify your money with time-tested, safe haven assets. Physical gold and silver. If I tell you anything, it's to diversify. That is the most important way that you are going to protect your family. Today, Goldco is offering up to 10% instant match in free bonus silver with qualified account. Plus, visit SarahLikesGold.com to qualify for a free 1-ounce silver Ronald Reagan coin. That's SarahLikesGold.com, or call 855-823-GOLD, SarahLikesGold.com, or call 855-823-GOLD. Thank you so much, Tudor, for being on the show. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, give us a like and a follow, and send us to a friend if you like the show. Please make sure you're subscribed to The Sarah Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. We really appreciate it. Follow me on Truth at Sarah Carter Official, on X at Sarah Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. God bless the state of Michigan, and God bless the great state of Texas.